Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USAPrepares.com. John is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Dr. Norman Shealy sent me an email last night, and he was stranded in Dallas, Texas, where his airplane flight had been delayed, and it looks like instead of coming home last night, he'll be home after the broadcast is over. So, so I contacted Rich Scheben and asked him if he would be able to be on the air with us, and here he is. Thank you so much, Rich Scheben, for doing that. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Vince. It's my pleasure. Sometimes stuff happens, right?
Yeah, it really does. And, it's I have said it before, in my mind, I am the most fortunate guy on the planet because I'm surrounded by just so many wonderful, wonderful instructors. And class, if you can make friends who will actually help you when you're in a pinch, if you've got a few of them, you've done really well. There are plenty of, and I've mentioned this to Rich even off the air, that, there are plenty of people who say, yeah, I heard about your barbecue, and yeah, all right, I'll help you drink some of that beer, if you need me to. There are plenty of people who will come and take, but if you can find some people who are actually true friends, that's kind of nice. So I really appreciate it, Rich Scheben. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, first of all, I just want to make a quick comment about free speech, and then I want to talk about one of the biggest articles, number one article actually on Drudge. But free speech. This is kind of what we do on the air here, Vince, and you're an expert at it, and I call myself a novice, an average Joe, non-hyphenated American. I do that, granted it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it really is true. We can all participate with the corrupt, manipulative system that we have right now, where the bottom 93% is losing so much ground, where their debt's going up, their savings are going down, and the middle class is being deleted from history, and there's so much despair out there. And this is one of the reasons why I do this. This is why I wrote the book. This is why I give talks and do radio shows, is to give people ideas and solutions for thinking outside the box. But at the same time, I also concentrate on the why we need to be more self-sufficient, on the why we need to speak up, on the why that we need to stick up for our combat soldiers, where millions have died for our freedoms, liberty, and so-called justice, which is only justice now for the top few percent of the people controlling the whole system, because everything is fake and phony. So free speech is absolutely, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights is absolutely so important right now to exercise on a daily basis. We have to use objective facts and rules, subjective emotional opinion, because the super wealthy basically doesn't want free speech for the little guy, which again is the bottom 93% of people in America, because they don't want criticisms. They sold out to China. They sold out to big tech. They sold out the American people for totalitarianism, basically for their elite rule. And we cannot allow their demanding of our silence to occur any longer. The silent majority must wake up, speak up, read up, and vote up. And the first article I want to talk about today, Vince, it was right on the top of Judge Report, which is usually the first website I go to every day. And they talk about this actor, Asia Argento. I don't even know who she is because I don't watch a lot of movies. If I do, it's movies that we have on hand that we enjoy. They're usually nature or motivated, oriented, or inspirational. And I'll read the first couple sentences. Argenta was one of the first and most vocal accusers of disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. Apparently, the Italian actress was one of the first to publicly accuse Harvey Weinstein. And I'm not sticking up, little sidebar here, I'm not sticking up for Harvey Weinstein. You know, if he actually did rape people, if he actually did rape kids, if he did what Bill Cosby did, where, you know, you literally drugged people where they were practically unconscious, you know, then he should pay for it. But when this Argenta and a lot of these so-called, and this is why I hate the words hypocrites or double standards, because it stops right there. This is why I always talk about practice what you preach laws. Well, apparently she paid off a minor young male actor and apparently had sex with him. And this article was actually pretty explicit with oral sex and then other type of sex and intercourse and stuff like that. I don't know why that's in there, but anyway, the point of me mentioning this is because all these hypocrisies doesn't hold water for anybody. All it does is add as a distraction and a tool to divide the American people by groups. And it's so important that we talk about group identity politics in this juncture right here, because this is the elite template, the playbook, the flowchart, the blueprint for destruction of not just America, but for all Western society and the world, really. Because when there's a divide and conquer strategy involved by a few people at the very top, nobody really benefits. And this is why we have to have practice with preach laws. We have to stand for principle. And standing for principle means the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, okay? Now, you can put a lot of subsets under rules, laws, and accountability. For example, I've mentioned this before, under rules, you can put subsets that I hear words every day coming out of the mainstream media, like morals, values, ethics. And under accountability, I can put down subsets like consequences for one's behavior. It means absolutely nothing. Any subset you put under rules, laws, and accountability means absolutely nothing when it's separately tiered for special groups and different people based on their victim group status or protectionist group status. Second, and I need to talk about this every show, looks like, Vince, especially standing for principle. The second criteria, and there's only three, is truth. That means you have to have the guts to stand for truth and be willing to be hated to stand for truth versus wanting to be liked for blowing smoke up people's ass. And the third criteria for standing for principle is if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status, a.k.a. group identity politics. This is why the elite disguise it with words like identity politics, because they don't want you to see under the veil, under the smoke, behind the curtain. It's all BS. So if somebody has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, that is unacceptable. And I talk about this all the time in the context of getting a job and keeping a job. If you lower the bars of standards and expectations because of what group you come from, a.k.a. victim group status, protectionist group status, group identity politics, all under the disguised veil of identity politics, it should be unacceptable. I'll tell you right now, when we allow the elite to hold on to the narratives and manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology because of what group you're from, just 5 or 6 companies doing this, race baiting around every corner in the mainstream media, distracting, dumbing down, and dividing us by race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, generation. This is unacceptable. We can't allow the powers that be to sway public opinion and the narratives, memes, talking points, microphones, and megaphones so they can divide and conquer the American people. Because there's nothing more racist, bigoted, sexist, misogynist, all these BS code words that are given every day that don't even have meaning anymore. There's nothing more racist and bigoted and sexist than saying that you can't compete, than saying that your work is suboptimal, so we're going to lower the bars or standards and expectations for your group. What they've done is destroyed America from within by rewarding mediocrity for decade after decade after decade after decade. This is why they use satire and banter for late-night shows. This is why 80% of the people read, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment after I'm done with this rant, read their news from Google and Facebook, which is all propaganda, lies, false flags, part of the divide and conquer strategy. This is all under the category of political correctness, which is probably at least 1,000 different subsets. But when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for what group you're in, you're really, really insulting the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence of all these people. You are degrading and disrespecting all those people shoved into these groups. You don't empower a nation or a group or an individual by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. You foment hate and a divide and conquer strategy. This is why we need to have practice what you preach laws. This is why the 3 criteria for standing for principle should be evident in every law in America. This is why we need citizen review boards overseeing everything and public forums where the people can speak in every town, maybe even in every neighborhood, because the little people aren't being represented. There's no restitution under the law. There's no protection under the law. And Vince, thank you for letting me rant, and I'll probably continue after the break.
And another thing. Rich Scheben and I will be right back. OffGridMontana.com. Rich Scheben's with us. And, Rich, you were talking about an impersonator by the name of Asia Argento. And as you mentioned, she was an accuser of Harvey Weinstein's sexual assault. And she was delivering a speech at the close of the Cannes Film Festival on Saturday. And this speech, according to NBCnews.com, took aim at the alleged disgraced Hollywood mogul. Actually, he's a disgraced Hollywood mogul, that's true. Who was a sexual predator. Okay, it took aim at him. And she said, quote, "In 1997, I was raped by Harvey Weinstein here at Cannes. I was 21 years old," Argento said, while presenting on stage during the festival's closing ceremony on Saturday in France. She said this festival was his hunting ground. She said that she predicted that Weinstein will never be welcomed here again. He will live in disgrace, shunned by a film community that once embraced him and covered up for his crimes. So she's saying all these things, and if you were to look at her with maybe short sleeve outfit on, you'd see that she is covered in ink. Lots of ink. It's got tramp stamps on her chest. She looks loose. Really loose. Is that a word that we use, in today's vernacular? Loose? Well, she looked loose. Like maybe, in her life she had loose-fitting clothing that could hardly stay on. Well, this gal, as you said, took advantage of an underage boy. Took advantage of him. And yet, she is saying that people need to pay for their crimes. And there's in the Drudge Report, let me see if I go there right now, there's a headline that was kind of neat about this, and it said, let's see, flashback. Argentino told Kane's audience, perps sitting among you. Perps sitting among you. She's absolutely right. She's one of them. She's one of them. And when you look at this gal, you can see that she's made a lot of mistakes in her life. Serial mistakes. And just her body shows that she's made these mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, there's not much. She's wearing a black top with long sleeves, obviously to cover up the ink. Close around her neck to cover up the ink. I mean, this gal is like wallpapered. Not the kind of person that I would suggest that young people follow the footsteps of. And what is she doing? She's got her left hand up in the fist position. You know, that's kind of like the closed fist of strike of the 1970s when students would see that fist. You know, rebel. That's kind of what that meant. But she's got plenty of ink on her, and she's not something that I would want to emulate. Rich?
Well, let me tell you something. I'm not even bringing up the point that she has tattoos and all this stuff. I'm bringing up the point, and let me backtrack a hair, because I do mention
tattoos.
Americans are
Rich,
not prudes.
She's a billboard. She is a billboard for the tattoo industry.
I agree. But let me tell you, Vince, why I said this, okay? Because I don't think Americans are prudes. All they care about is adult mutual consensual sex. But what I'm doing is calling out the fact that there's different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what victim group status you have, what protectionist group status you have, what your identity politics is. Identity politics, and that's why I went on that little rant, has destroyed America just as bad, if not worse, than the corrupt monetary policies of the central banks, Keynesian economics, and our demographic situation. Group identity politics has destroyed America. And this is why if someone's been a mistress or a gold digger or, a Stormy Daniels porn star and they're asking for money, they should be called out. The same rules, laws, and accountability.
All right, going into a break. Rich Scheben. Yeah, Rich Scheben's with us. So, Rich, if you don't mind, I'd like to just explain why I think America's falling down. What's wrong with America? About 20 years ago, I bought what's called a work light, sometimes called a shop light, sometimes called a trouble light. And what a trouble light is a light with an extension cord and like 20 feet long, and it may be a little slim fluorescent light. It may be an incandescent light housing. And so I bought this one I really, really liked. It was made by a company called Bayco, B-A-Y-C-O. It's yellow, has a yellow cord. And over the 20 years that I've had it, it's slipped, it's fallen on the concrete floor a bunch of times, and the lens cracked. And I decided that, it's time that I break down and buy another one. So I bought this next one, and I looked all over eBay, all over the internet. I wanted one just like the one I had, just like it. Not LED, I wanted the fluorescent tube because I've got some spare tubes. And I found this new model that I didn't like. I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the way the hangers would hang the light on the hood of the car or wherever you're working. Where you could just hook this light on and shine it in the direction you want to look. I just didn't like it. And it was made by the same company. And then I finally found new old stock. I found one of that older vintage, the one that I wanted, and I paid more for it. Paid more for the older model, and that was what I wanted, and I was willing to do that. And it arrived from Pep Boys. I thought, gosh, Pep Boys is advertised PEP, the automotive chain store. It arrived, and I opened the box, and it was not the old model. It was not the old stock. It was the new one. It was the crappy new one that's made in China. Now, here's the problem. Not only is it made in China, which bothered me, I thought I was buying the old model that was made in the United States. This thing, I've got it in my hands, has a 5 foot 4 inch cord. 5 foot 4 inches. What can you look at under the hood with a power cord that's 5 feet 4 inches long? It won't even get from the wall outlet in your garage. If your wall outlet is right next to the hood of your car, it won't get from the wall outlet to the center of the engine. It's too short. So why is that? Why did the Bayco organization stop making a fabulous product, one that would last 20 years, and replace it with one that's not usable? It has to be greed. It has to be. Some jerk in the accounting department said, look, I don't work on cars, but I don't need to work on cars. We don't need a cord that's 20 feet long on our shop light. People have extension cords. Let them buy their own cord. We'll just put a short cord on this. We'll save 50 cents on each unit. We'll make a killing, and we'll sell these shop lights, and we'll make them look cool. We'll put like a pistol grip handle on it. You don't need a pistol grip handle on a shop light. You really don't. What you really need is bright light with a reflector on it, with a hanger to hang the light so you can aim it in a specific direction so it doesn't shine in your eyes, but it shines on the work that you're trying to accomplish, the repair you're trying to do. And you need to have a cord long enough to reach that wall outlet. And it needs to be able to take drop after drop after drop as they slide, down the engine, or they slide out of your hand or whatever, and survive. But no, they made this product that's not usable. So I keep looking at this thing, thinking, what am I going to do with it? Well, I can go and buy another cord, another 20-foot cord. I can find one of them and replace the cord and have a somewhat usable shop light. But it uses the same bulb as the old one that's 20 years old, except that they made the housing smaller. The lens is smaller. So you don't get to use all of the light from the tube, because the way they've designed it, they cover up some of the light bulb. It's pretty poor design. But yet, that's what they're selling. And can you buy the old one now? No. Unless you find one at a garage sale or something like that. So when I say something's wrong with America, or what's wrong with America, that is what's wrong with America. The fact that they make products that you can't use. And I just found a new improved version of this Bayco light. Now it's available with a 25-foot cord. Not when I bought it. But now you can spend way more money. You can spend way over $30 and get one for $26.95 plus $8.75 shipping, and you can get it with a cord that you can use. They figured out that, maybe we shouldn't follow Sears's footsteps. Maybe the customer is important. Maybe we need to make products that customers want to use, because if we don't, we'll lose our customers. I think that maybe they figured that out. Maybe it's too late. It's too late for me. I don't like those guys, because I have this light I can't use unless I modify it. And what's wrong with using an extension cord? Well, when you have an extension cord, like one of those orange ones, you plug it in and you tug on whatever the device is that's plugged into that cord, it gets unplugged, unless you tie a knot in the end of the cord. So it's a nuisance. I hate this. I hate this product. And therefore, by extension, I hate Bayco, B-A-Y-C-O. I don't want to do business with them, even though I love their first product. I think that everyone, they must have fired everybody who was in their design department that did a good job years ago. I think they got rid of them all and replaced them with accountants. And by the way, the CEO of Laclede Electric Cooperative, who I'm going to get to see on Friday, was an accountant, and he took over for the previous general manager. And under his administration, we've enjoyed accelerated rate hikes. He's an accountant. That's what they do. Accountants look at numbers. How can we make these numbers bigger? How can we turn a 10 into an 11? An 11 into a 20? How do we do that? How do we do that without too much yelling and screaming from our customers? And the problem is customers just sheepishly turn away, and they just say, I guess that's the way it is. I guess I'm supposed to live with this new short cord. I'm not willing to do it. Rich? Is that what's wrong with America?
Well,
We're being fleeced?
there's a very long list with what's wrong with America, and I want to go into an article after I'm done with answering your concerns here, and that is we have less goods and services, less R&D, less customer service. Basically, it's all about buying stocks and feathering the nest of the executives through stock options, dividends, executive cash, acquisitions and merger, new debt. People don't care. The corporations, they have protection in a fascist system that's been going on for 20 years with the big corporate oligarchies and the big government is protecting each other. And we have a sold-out system where our today's lawyers, judges, politicians, and bankers have sold out the little people. You know, and that's a little tangent I want to go into real quick. You know, people, you know, the Antifa and the so-called anti-fascists, what they're doing is they're bought and paid for by George Soros groups and people of that ilk for the purpose of creating, being hired mercenaries to create violence. And when we get to the point where we don't use our big boy and big girl words anymore, and we're, you know, grunting, yelling, screaming, chanting, and creating violence, instead of having discussions, this is how they change history. And I'll give you an example in the terminology and definition of fascism. Post-2009, all the electronic versions of fascism definitions has changed. It is now called right-wing ideology or movement that's fundamentally opposed to democracy and liberalism. First of all, there's nothing liberal about what they do. If you heard me talk about QE for the people, I give like a 10-step process or somewhere in there of what we can do to benefit the little people, the bottom 93%. In other words, a quantitative easing program for the people who put into the kitty who have had their wealth stolen by the elite. But what fascism really is, at least pre-2009, is a system of government marked by a totalitarian dictator or dictators for social and economic control and suppression and the opportunity by the system, by the powers that be. And again, it's in the form of big corporate oligarchies who create an alliance with big government. So when I talk about all these words that don't mean anything or politically correct buzzwords, what the elite have done, and they're doing this through mainstream media and the big tech companies, is literally trying to make you submissive and break your will, take your freedoms, liberty, and justice away from you by changing definitions of words. So when you talk about things that are happening in America and how America is going downhill, it's because not the fact that people are trying to be high and mighty angels, but the fact that we are allowing a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in. Now, here's an article right here, Vince. Teens spend all their free time on social media, and many don't read anymore, and it could be ruining their future. You think? I mean, have you ever tried to talk to an adult who doesn't read? These people are so easily persuaded.
It's hard.
Yeah. They're easily persuaded by the Googles
they have
and the
opinions.
Facebooks. Yeah. And they basically are more, they can be more persuaded by gossip and rumors because they don't communicate well than doing their own research on their own and thinking for themselves. Now, regarding this one article I just talked about, teens spend all their free time on social media and many don't read anymore. They just scroll. I will address what we need to do after the break here in music. Vince, thanks for letting me rant.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. It's fun listening to you rant. Rich Sheaben's with us, offgridmontana.com, offgridmontana.com. Rant day here at USA Prepares. Rich Sheaben's with us. Rich, please continue.
Yeah. All right, Vince. Well, regarding the lack of reading and what they say about kids and millennials today, I think a lot of them feel like there's so much despair they don't have choices. And that's why I give a lot of tours on kid ranches and just a lot of people in general. And I have a DVD video out there. I don't care if anybody buys it, but just to show how we live in the outdoors and in nature. If you're under 55 years old. You should be doing sports, hiking, fishing. People say, when they look at my website, oh, Rich, well, I don't hunt and fish. You don't have to hunt and fish. I give tours on edible and medicinal plants. I garden. I do little things here and there throughout the day, and I mix it in with a lot of study and reading so I can share information with the American people, especially the little people, to try to give them ideas and solutions on how to create a better life and control a little more of their own destiny, because freedom, liberty, time, and health has been degraded and is being reduced on an hourly basis for the little people. We need to stop defending our group and start defending America and creating ideas and solutions for everybody, especially for the little guy. And, the things that we read, it's unbelievable how many things need to be filtered, especially from the bought and paid for mainstream media, which is owned by the elite treasonous class. Let me just give you an example. Here's an article that media freaks out over ICE arresting an illegal immigrant, but apparently he was taking his wife to the hospital to have a baby, and he was wanted for murder. And the unbelievable comments that came from the mainstream media was beyond, ICE, Huffington Post here, ICE defends its officers' decision to detain a man whose wife was about to give birth, referencing Trump's zero-tolerance policy. But they don't, the New York Times, CNN, there's an article, there's responses from all these different mainstream media outfits defending this man to drive his wife to the hospital. And not one of them put in context that he was wanted for murder. And, again, I realize that illegal immigrants they are trying to come here for a better life. But we have to look at the bottom 93% of Americans and how they've been taken advantage of. And I'm going to mention some statistics, again, because the powers that be want to foment hate and race wars. But here's some statistics about immigration that we have to keep in mind. Over 4,300 Americans are killed by illegal alien criminals every year. Who does that affect? Mostly the poor and the middle class. It's the same wars over and over again. Who fights the wars everywhere? The poor and the middle class. Who gets hosed economically? The poor and the middle class. And this is what a group identity politics has done. It's taken away opportunity, knowledge, ingenuity, productivity, and innovation from the little people. It's turned America into the law of diminishing returns because of the rewarding of mediocrity for decade after decade. Now, for those of you who say, I don't want to pay my car insurance because it's getting too high, or they don't want to pay their property taxes because the public education fees have gotten too high, or they're tired, they can't afford to go to take their family into a hospital and go an emergency care. Well, the reason why all this is so high is because of cost shifting. Because mostly illegal immigrants who don't have to pay for this and get all these things free. A police pulls an illegal immigrant over, doesn't have insurance, they just let them go. And you have to pay for it. Vince?
Yeah, Rich, when you talk about the little guy, the bottom 93%, for those of you new to the class, he's talking about us. Us. All of us. And he's not talking down to anybody. He's talking about us. And I love the term treasonous class. How apt that is. We'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercials. Rich Scheben. We're all set, cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of a USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, off air last night, you and I were chatting, and you said something that absolutely was brilliant. And I think we should share that with our class. And let me describe what we're talking about. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about people not having the same opportunities as we've had, those of us who are baby boomers. And here's how the discussion, here's the central point of the discussion. Many of us have been taught to believe that our home is our biggest investment. I'm not so sure our home is an investment. It's a place where we pour money in, but for me, it's a place where we live. Now, having a farm actually is an investment because it's a business. But people have been led to believe that their home is their biggest investment. So if they have a quarter of an acre or an eighth of an acre or half an acre or 1 acre, they work on it, and they have that 30-year mortgage note, and they pay and pay and pay, and ultimately that note gets paid off if everything works out according to plan. Then they believe that that house that they bought 30 years ago for less Federal Reserve units is now worth more Federal Reserve units. But right now we have a huge problem, and that is who's going to buy the houses 30 years later. And that goes right to the millennials. So now we have the millennials who are having a really tough time earning a living. They're living in the now rather than planning for the future. Not all of them, but many. And those are the ones who would be buying the homes that we have worked 30 years on to maintain, to pay for, and at some point, we may want to sell them. Move to a smaller place, downsize, something that's easier to maintain. The problem is, how are the millennials going to afford the houses that we thought we could sell when we bought ours, right? All of ours. Rich, did I say that accurately?
Yeah, but there's a lot of extenuating circumstances, like, for example, the increase in taxes, for property taxes that have gone through the roof, and we've talked about this in great detail, how even the Department of Revenue in Montana had came over to my house and said that I had finished basement, 2 finished bathrooms, and all these different amenities, which I didn't, and I called them out on it, and they came out here, and even though they only reduced my property taxes by $195, and they committed fraud, and we called them out on it, this is what's happening all over America. So, and, I don't want to give too many kudos to the baby boomers either, because when you look at statistics, Vince, Americans aged 65 to 74, I just mentioned this on the air a couple weeks ago, has seen a 204% surge in bankruptcy filings. So when you look at generation versus generation, there's not that much of an advantage because the young generations have time leverage on their side where they can make up for lost time and the older people can't. Now, a lot of these reasons for prices going up on properties, on homes, is the cost of lumber. We're importing lumber from countries like Canada, when here in northwest Montana we have lumber and timber literally being burned because Democrat policies have basically eliminated managing the forest, eliminated it. So what we need to do is go back in and harvest our healthy timber for lumber for our young people, and especially harvest our timber in Montana that's dead and that's acting like a fire accelerant, because especially with all this geoengineering and all this crap being dropped by planes, and now we have laser energy proof on video creating fires and torching homes and stuff like that. We need to reduce our fire hazards dramatically more than ever. And the powers that be over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years actually, have basically eliminated forest management under the guise of environmentalism and political correctness. So I think there's a lot of blame to go around everywhere. But the first thing we need to do, I would like to see, because of the corruption and manipulation that we've had, I'd like to see an elimination of property taxes. If we eliminate property taxes, especially for older generations, there would be an incentive, a light at the end of the tunnel program, so people could buy the house, look at it as an investment. And I'm a big proponent, and Vince, we've talked about this till blue in the face. I'm a big proponent of owning some acreage and not just living in the subdivision cookie-cutter, politically correct follower mentality where you've got to pay for all you're consuming and all you have is a house on a little postage stamp lot. I would like to see people go back to more rural areas and grow gardens and have fruit trees and maybe manage their own forests and do things of that nature, raise animals, do things that give them skill sets. And we relearn the old 19th century skill sets, but dovetail them with 21st century technology. And off-grid living and having a solar array is one great example, because we're teaching our children how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct, and they have no skill sets. They come out of college with so much debt, they're losing leverage, and especially time leverage, on their gaining in assets because they have to rent for a few years instead of buying because they have so much debt, and they're not learning anything because 90% of the college degrees are worthless. And again, this comes to one of my ideas that I talked about till I'm blue in the face about self-sufficiency preparedness schools. Everything about all the above that I just talked about and much more, plus creating a database of consumerism for people who are involved in this project, and we help each other out. Because the little guy, again, the bottom 93% of income earners, are losing so much ground. Vince?
You mentioned the self-sufficiency and preparedness schools.
Mm-hmm.
I got an email from one of our class who was interested in becoming more self-sufficient. They have a small amount of land in another state, and they saw things that were coming their way that just didn't feel right. Wildfires, water shortages, things like that. And they wanted to come to this area. And they sent me an email. You got a copy of it. You talked to them on the phone. How long did you talk to them, without being really specific and saying exactly who they are and what they were doing, but how long did you talk to them on the phone?
I'm going to totally shoot it from the hip. I didn't allocate the time. They were very nice people, and they really listened well. They had great questions, and they really wanted to make their life better for themselves and give themselves more options. But I think I talked to them probably, give or take, 2 hours. And again, I'm shooting from the hip. I didn't allocate the time or write it down or anything,
sure.
But I'm guessing that somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple hours.
And I did the same thing. I talked to them for about 2 hours on the phone, and they said, we're going to be coming to Missouri, and we want to take you to lunch. I thought, that's very nice. And we talked some more on the phone. I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you come to the farm, and I'll show you what it takes. So you were talking about a self-sufficiency and preparedness class. So you had one on the phone with them, independent from me. I had one on the phone, independent from you. And then they visited. And we spent from 11:01, when I got off the air, until about 7 o'clock that night. And they said, it'd be nice to grab a bite to eat. And our son was in the kitchen when they mentioned that. And he said, well, let me explain how it works. We go Dutch. We pay for our own food. And so we did. We went out, grabbed a simple dinner, and we talked some more. And they had to eat anyway, and we did too. So we decided to look at the big city, Lebanon, Missouri. And so we had an Italian meal there. And it was wonderful. But the point I'm trying to make is, can you? Yes, you can. You can make your lot better in life. Yes, you can learn how to farm. And I'm proof of that because I did not come from a lineage of farmers. My parents were not farmers. And I learned how to farm, the hard way, by reading and by doing. And you can too. And, if you think about it, if you have a house that has now appreciated to where it's worth $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000, you can trade that. You can sell that and take that amount of Federal Reserve accounting unit dollars and buy a farm. But you need to do several things. And, Rich and I are certainly willing to teach how to do that. And he's done it. The point is, he wants to have this school. I want to have this school, but there aren't very many students. who are interested in learning how to do this. But yes, we can do it, and yes, we have done it. And the interesting thing is that this couple, close to my age, has decided that this is something they really want to do, and they're probably going to buy a property in Missouri within a close distance from us. That's what they want to do. I actually showed them a property. We walked it. We literally walked a quarter of a mile. No, actually, we actually walked a half a mile through it. So we walked from one end of it to another end, which is a mile hike, and we didn't leave the property. Walked to one end, turned around, and came back. 1 mile, and didn't leave the property. And they loved it. And it's awesome. And there are plenty of them here. So if you think you're, in addition to our village that's helpful to the village, give us a contact at instructor@usapreparedness.com. We'll help you. Class, a few of our engineers here at GCN are musicians. Nathan is a musician. He plays, during the week and at nights when he's not engineering for us. And John is also a musician. He plays bass guitar. And we were talking about music, and I asked him the question about what happened. What happened to music? We had Chuck Berry, we had the Ronettes, we had the Beatles, we had musicians that could sing, Beach Boys, musicians that could sing, write, play their musical instruments, perform, and they did it the hard way. They did it without the electronic augmentation. They did it without all of these computer enhancements and edits, and they really worked at their craft, and they were quite good. And now, with all of the technology that we have to make it easier, music is lousy. You can't understand the words make no sense, there's little rhyming. It's horrible. I can't listen to it. I mean, I listened to it long enough to turn it off. That's it. I can't stand it. And, we talked about that, and, maybe we can have John do a broadcast about that with me, and maybe Nathan as well, and talk about what happened to music. But, Rich, do you agree that music has gotten marginal at best?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the best music era, and I think it's in most movies, and that proves it, is probably the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, very early 80s. And, there's just not a lot of good musicians left. I like unique voices. I think Cher is a great musician or singer. I think ABBA, the two ladies from Sweden, I think they're great. There's just so many. Amy Stewart from the 70s. I'm trying to think of. There's so many great songs. I think what the 60s, 70s, and early 80s had was uniqueness, and they had a beat. I'm into the beat, Donna Summer type stuff. I like the beat. I don't really care about the words, and I think a lot of today's musicians are being coerced some way. And again, conformity comes in many different ways, mostly bribery, but it can come through intimidation, shaming, threats, blackmail, blacklisting, etc. I think a lot of musicians are being coerced somehow by the powers that be to use music as a propaganda tool. And it's used to sway public opinion and divide the American people. And I think that's happening in a lot of cases. Vince?
There's a band, and not all of them are still alive, and some absolutely brilliant musicians and singers got together. And they happen to all be male in this case. Roy Orbison, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, and George Harrison. And they just got together, and they called themselves the Traveling Wilburys. Wilburys. And I found that name quite interesting. Like, what is a Wilbury? Well, it's because they made a mistake, and George Harrison said, we'll bury it in the mix. We'll bury the mistake in the mix. You know, the final mix of the song. And so they call themselves the Traveling Wilburys. And they have a song called End of the Line. And I was introduced to that song by John Statmiller. He happened to be playing that here at the farmhouse. It is absolutely captivating. So, class, if you just want to go to, if you haven't heard it, you can go to YouTube and you can type in Traveling Wilburys, Wilburys, End of the Line is the name of the song. I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating. So that's an exception. That's an exception to the lousy music that is produced today. It wasn't produced, this year, but recently. And it's quite excellent. But, we're talking about some of the top musicians in the world. Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, George Harrison, Roy Orbison, top of the top. We'll be right back with Scheben. Rich Scheben's with us. And in class, if you want to get a chance to meet me, I'll be making a public appearance on Friday at the Cowan Civic Center in Lebanon, Missouri. Spelled Lebanon, Lebanon. Lebanon is how it's spelled. It's pronounced in the local vernacular as Lebanon. I'll be on stage talking about how I want to lower our electric bills. And it's an uphill fight, absolutely uphill fight, to convince people that they're in charge of this cooperative. They are the ones who get to vote for who they think will be interested in protecting them. They get to choose the board of directors every year, and there are 9 directors. They each serve for a 3-year term, so every year 3 of them are up for re-election. And once they get elected, they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave. They want to stay there. And we have had nothing but rate increase after rate increase after rate increase after rate increase with these board of directors. And I want my electric bill lowered. And the only way I can do it is to get on the board of directors and make my case and tell the board, look, you can't kill the customer. You can't do what Sears did. You'll go out of business, except for the fact that the electric utility company is a monopoly. But you can't steal from your customers. You can't keep taking more and more and more. It's not necessary. There are other ways of reducing costs and waste. And I know how to do it. I'm selling electricity right now to the electric cooperative. Excess electricity that we have generated here on our farm. I'm selling it for 2.1 cents per kilowatt. The electric utility is taking that same electricity and selling it for 10 cents a kilowatt. And they do something that I think is just as unfair as could be. And that is they charge for the meter. But they don't call it that. They call it an access charge. An access charge. Kind of like going to the gas station and you decide that you want to get some gasoline for your vehicle. So you pull in and the sign says $27 meter charge. And then you pay your $27. Now you can get gasoline at the price they want to sell it. But you have to pay to use the pump. Can you imagine? That's what it's like. Paying for the meter. Paying for them to tell you how much they're going to charge you. Rich?
Well, yeah, not to mention the fact that there's smart meter ill effects coming from that particular frequency and the lack of privacy and the high monthly bills that you get paid. And you basically, when you're with an electric company, they have a monopoly over you because there isn't competition in any given area. And this is why off-grid living is so important. And if you could teach your people under that, in those counties, how to live off-grid and maybe have classes and maybe have citizen review boards and maybe have public forums where people can actually speak for more than 2 minutes per person and not pretend it's for the public benefit, but actually prove it's for the public benefit, and then more and more people sell the electricity, the amps, the voltage back to the electric company, and that makes a benefit by lowering the cost of the total electric cost to the people. And then this little sidebar here, I don't know if it's just me or everybody that can hear you, but during the commercials, I hear everything you're saying. And I don't know if the rest of the country's hearing that or if it's just me, but I just wanted to mention that to you.
Yeah. John, my understanding is that if I'm talking to you off air, it's just you and me. Is that right? Yeah, that's correct. So, yes, Rich, you can hear it because you are connected. But, when...
Okay. I just wanted to make sure you were aware, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Sharon in Montana, welcome. You're on with Rich Scheben.
Yeah, good morning. I'm jumping back a few topics. I've been listening to you as I'm doing chores, so I couldn't call earlier. But when you were talking about people paying off their house and hopefully reselling it, I think a really sad thing that's happening now is people are getting reverse mortgages on all that investment in order to just sort of survive. And I've known quite a few older couples who have done that. And I just thought I'd point that out. So I think it's, pretty sad that they can't live on whatever they set back for retirement, but feel compelled to basically use up all the equity they have in their house just to live. So, just a point.
Yes,
good point.
Yes,
good point,
and when they're done, when the term of that contract is over, they have no house. They've turned that over in favor of getting monthly payments. You're absolutely right, and it's very, very sad that we got to this point.
Yeah, most people hope to leave a little something to their family, and they'll be lucky if they can cover their burial expenses, So, anyway, that's all I wanted to mention.
Sharon, I've got a comment that's kind of apropos to what you're saying. Back in 1980, I was on an airplane, and I was flying from the East Coast to California. And I happened to sit next to this gal, and I didn't know her before we sat down, and we were talking about, businesses and things, and she was a Californian and an entrepreneur. And she said to me, what would you rather do? Would you rather die owing a lot of money or die leaving a lot of money? I said, that's easy. If I had just those two choices, I'd rather not die. But if I had those two choices, I would rather die leaving a lot of money. And she indicated to me that I'm never going to make it as an entrepreneur because entrepreneurs borrow lots of money from other people and they really don't care about the consequences. They just borrow money and they hope they're going to make it. They hope that it's going to work. It's going to be the big thing. And you look at Elon Musk, he's burning through a fortune a day of other people's money, right? So what you're saying is very sad that people are using the reverse mortgages and they're not thinking about the long term. And we have flipped from what my dad taught me was you don't have to spend all your money. You can save some because you don't know what the future is going to bring. And if you have a problem, you've got that cushion of your savings. And you can use that, this is when I was like 10. And you can use that savings for the rough times. And he brought me to the bank where we opened my first savings account. And I got a chance to see, $1 go in. I think he started the account with maybe he gave me $5 or something. And we started that account. And then that was the seed that encouraged me to save more and more and more and more. And as I cut lawns and earned more money, my mom would drive me to the bank and I'd make the deposits and I could watch those digits grow at 5.25%. That's not the case today. There's no incentive to save, but back then there was in terms of interest. But you bring to the air a very, very important point. And in class, if you can avoid a reverse mortgage, need to avoid a reverse mortgage. Rich?
Well, I'll tell you, I think a lot of people, and I'm not trying to be a proponent of reverse mortgages, but they're usually a last resort. And people are starting to read the tea leaves because housing prices are at the highest they probably are going to be in a long time. Now, land, I think, is a different thing. I think bare land that can offer the recreation, the garden site, the ability to raise animals and hunt and fish on it and grow fuel on it, et cetera, I think is going to be a whole different ballgame. But people see savings going down. They see us heading into another subprime catastrophe. We've been there with auto loans for quite some time. School loans are going through the roof, especially when 90% of the college degrees are worthless. We see less savings, more debt, less credit collapsing. I've talked about this in many different variations, including the flattening of the yield curves. We have more bureaucracy. We have CNN and mainstream media, excuse me, and I was going to talk about that if we have time, promoting violence, more brainwashing, and the so-called anti-fascists who are fascist. Lawyers are corrupt, judges are corrupt, politicians, bankers have sold out the bottom 93%. We have no burden of proof. It all depends on what group you're in. We have the elite and the powers that be creating the problems, manufacturing the reactions, and buying the solutions. We have no due process.
Yeah, so we want to encourage our class to go by land.
My point is, Vince, that people see no light at the end of their tunnel, and this is why they're doing reverse mortgages.
Sharon, quick question for you. Do you know offhand what a typical acre, if you were to buy 10, 20, 30 acres in Montana is? Do you have a rough feel for that?
It depends where you're buying it. If you're buying it right, like near the biggest town here, it'd be way expensive. If you're willing to drive a little bit, you probably could get a better deal. And it depends if it has well septic and, it's real variable, so I honestly couldn't tell you offhand.
You can get farm acreage around here, let's say 40 acres or 80 acres, for around $2,000 an acre. You can make your own mistakes, build your own house. Does that sound good or not to you?
That sounds like a lot better deal. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to welcome Alex. Alex is our new USA Prepares engineer. He just got promoted. To USA Prepares. He's operating the board. He is 19 years old, and he is an accomplished musician, playing since age 4. And he plays the piano, the 88s. Welcome, Alex. Thanks for engineering USA Prepares. Rich Scheben, where do you want to go in the last segment?
Well, we only have a few minutes left, but, you mentioned, I want to paraphrase what you said, a few segments ago about how people are looking to get out of Dodge, leave the blue states, the high-tax states. We talk about this all the time, and try to control their own destiny because everything's so corrupt, they don't know where to go and what to do. Well, here's an example why. Pardon me. CNN is being accused of attempting to intimidate the Paul Manafort jury after the far-left cable channel and 6 other anti-Trump outlets requested the jurors' names and home addresses. This stuff has been going on for years. In 2013, CNN led a mob in a campaign to destroy the career of a local radio clown who was performing while wearing an Obama mask. In 2013, CNN broadcasted the Social Security number of George Zimmerman. Remember with the Trayvon Martin that turned out to be self-defense. Sure. Basically, they've legitimized. They're legitimizing violence right now against Trump supporters. So when people see all this stuff and they see there's no more burden of proof, there's no more due process, everything is so corrupt. Congress voting themselves after a full pension and benefit package after one term. Everything is for the gain of the elite, the personal gain of campaign contributions, lobbyists, special interests, PACs. government grants. Everything supersedes free market supply and demand and the little people. And the pork barrel spending, the police state being militarized, with the FBI, CIA, NSA, DOJ basically sold out to the highest bidder, antitrust monopolies, the too big to fail and too big to jail. You look at the big tech companies selling out the American people. What are people supposed to do? What are people supposed to think? And this is why I always talk about the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. And that's the first criteria for standing for principle. So I just want to finish up with this these hypocrisies, which I hate the word, and I would rather have practice what you preach laws. Here's another article right here, Vince. 2017 congressional candidate who ran on gun control platform in Georgia was arrested last week with a charge shooting the former manager of her political action committee, according to the police. You can't make this stuff up. 90% of the shooters are Democrats, for Pete's sakes. This is getting to be almost satirical. It's beyond ridiculous. 30-year-old Kelly Collins was a Democrat running for Georgia's 10th congressional seat. She pulled out of the race last year for personal reasons and was arrested last week on murder charges. Now, in all fairness, this was an August 13th article, so technically maybe not quite last week. But we're getting to the point where we have a totally separate set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in. And I'll read the last paragraph. While running for Congress, Collins told girls really rule. When your friends and family are depending on you to make ethical decisions, but it's okay to shoot people, that affect their lives for many years, a member of Congress should hold her or himself to a much higher standard than the bare minimum that many GOP members are currently using as a benchmark. Please, 90% of the shooters are Democrats. Practice what you preach laws. We need them. Someone in the White House has to step up instead of feathering their own frickin' nest. Vince?
You sound angry.
Maybe a little bit.
Rich, you're talking, we only have a few seconds left. We're talking about taxes. In 1962, my parents lived in an average house in this neighborhood in the East Coast. Taxes were $188. I just looked up what the average taxes in that neighborhood are today. $14,519. They went from $188 to $14,500.
Despicable.
Average annual real estate taxes. No kidding. Rich, thanks so much for being with us.